Guys, I think Joker 2 might actually be a masterpiece. You see these sheep? This was us, the audience, marching to see Joker 2. And we all had these preconceived notions on what to expect, what shenanigans the Joker might get up to. But our little sheep brains thought we deserved a certain movie. Oh, no. Now look at this. You see this black sheep? This is Todd Phillips. And he has an idea cooking. He's not going to conform to giving us sheep what we want because he knows we need something better. He's got a master plan, a Joker-like plan even with his next movie. He's going to tear the whole system down. You know how he did that? Well, he made a movie sequel so ridiculously mid that I don't think anyone's going to bother seeing it. Well, it's got to be a middle finger to Warner Bros., right? Maybe he's a huge fan of the Batgirl movie that got canned. He's getting revenge, yeah. Maybe he's making a statement against franchising standalone films. Or maybe he just made a bad movie. All right, I'm done now. I'll give my actual thoughts on Joker 2, Folie, which, by the way, the movie's not nearly good enough to justify that pretentious-ass title. Joker 2 is just so insanely mid that I almost wish it was worse. Like, I wish the movie was more bad entertaining so that I could at least say, oh, I had a good time watching it. It was entertaining. But that really just isn't the case. If Joaquin Phoenix showed up and clearly just was phoning it in and didn't give a shit at all, I think that'd be funny. Or if the script was just super over the top and ridiculous, it'd be like, this is so dumb, but at least it was kind of fun to watch. Joker 2 isn't any of those things. It is just boring. It's just plain boring, unfortunately. And it's such a shame because there truly were fleeting moments watching it where I was like, oh, I felt that feeling I felt watching Joker 1 for like 2 seconds. And then it went away. Damn, and then you just are sleepy the rest of the movie. It's so frustrating. You just see the potential, or at least maybe the nostalgia of the first one, that's just never really reaches the true heights in this sequel. This movie actually reminds me of the Game of Thrones in a lot of ways because everyone is at the top of their game in terms of cast and crew on the set, but the script is just so fundamentally flawed, and the direction and the vision just for the movie in general is so bad. They can try as hard as they can, but they're never gonna save it. It's unfortunate. I'm sure it's frustrating on their part. The movie looks great. Cast does a good job with their performances. The soundtrack is good again. So if that's something you liked about the first Joker, maybe you weren't a huge fan of the story even, but you went to Joker 1 and you were like, well, that looked cool and Joaquin Phoenix was captivating, whatever. I think that you could still justify that as a reason to see Joker 2. There's a lot of great artistry on display still. I noticed, especially in this movie, there's a ton of really cool one-shot sweeping sequences that are just filmed really well. The cinematography in general is still great. The set design and the costumes and just the color composition of the grimy filth of Gotham juxtaposed with Joker's sort of whimsical, colorful, crazy imagination. It still translates well on screen. It looks good. Joaquin Phoenix, again, gives it his all. It's a shame the script doesn't really do him justice. I would also say Lady Gaga actually did a pretty good job. I think I'll get more into that later, but I gotta give a shout out to the composer of this movie as well, as same as the first movie. Her name is Hildur Guðnadóttir. I'm so sorry I butchered that. Again, she does a good job, though, continuing those haunting string themes from the first movie that I think did such a good job of really lending to that atmosphere and making everything seem so imposing. I would say that continues in Joker 2. Her soundtrack is still good. And I would honestly say the few parts that I felt maybe emotionally attached to probably were because of her soundtrack, because it's just like that good. Anyway, though, I'm going to start maybe just kind of talking from the beginning to the end of the movie, with the whole thing in perspective rather than just summarizing it, because I'm assuming you guys already saw it, so I'm just going to kind of get right to it. There's the opening animation, which upon first watch, I thought was cool. It's well animated. It's interesting. The visuals conveying the story that like Arthur is this separate personality in him that's kind of causing all this trouble and shenanigans, but then once the consequences come, Arthur's the one that has to deal with the consequences. It's like a well done animation. But I really think this only works in the context of the plot line where the lawyers are trying to play that storyline into their case to get him off the death penalty. The Joker is a separate entity. The part where it gets weird, though, is how I feel like the movie itself is trying to get the audience, at least this is how I felt. I felt like the movie was trying to kind of get the audience to think, is the Joker actually a separate entity from Arthur? And to anyone that saw the first movie, you would go, no. I saw the first movie. I saw Arthur create this Joker persona or character for him to navigate, just being crushed by the world or whatever, society. We live in one. It felt very clear to me from the first movie that Arthur is just leaning into this persona to kind of ascend, and that he's not a different person. So the fact that this movie's even trying to get the audience to question, like, is that the case, is super fucking weird, and I don't get it. Yeah, so there's that, and then it starts in Arkham, and I actually gotta say, I kind of liked the first 30 minutes of this movie. The first 30 minutes, I was actually pretty locked in. It's capturing that same atmosphere of the first movie, of how the gloominess. Arkham looks like it fucking sucks. And Harley, he's going to meet her in music class, and he's got a trial going on, and they're probably going to, mingle and do some crazy shit to get him out. And I was like, this is actually a pretty interesting premise and setup. Where's it going to go? It goes nowhere. The movie is so sleepy for the next all of it. One thing I want to talk about with the beginning, though, which I didn't really think about until after the movie actually, is I found it a little bit strange that Arthur is so like gloomy and depressed at the beginning. Like I said, first time watching it, I didn't really think about it, but it kind of did seem like the whole point of the end of the first Joker was that he sort of snapped, had developed this coping mechanism, the Joker, to navigate his life now. Shouldn't the movie kind of had started where he's already kind of full Joker? He just seemed like depressed old Arthur again, where I thought he kind of transitioned already or snapped. He wasn't even playing up the Joker persona to the guards or anything. It would have been one thing if they showed him depressed like on his own and then boom, in front of people, so he's like, oh, Joker. But he just is depressed the whole time. Are we supposed to believe that he truly just needs the makeup or something, or being in there regress him? Which I don't get, because his trauma and pain amplified the Joker, so wouldn't him being in Arkham just make it even worse? Looking back on it, I'm like, I don't get it, but I still thought the beginning was okay. Yeah, he meets Harley. Okay, cool. I think there's debate on like the Harley being an inmate storyline. I don't really care about that much. I think it could have worked. And then I think the musical stuff had already started by this point, but yeah, there is the musical element. That's predominantly probably why Lady Gaga was cast. Again, I think she's fine, but we gotta talk about the musical stuff. I was never opposed to the concept of a musical. I didn't want to shut that down. That could be good. I've seen musicals I like. I think they can be an interesting way to tell a story, and maybe it would work, especially because Todd Phillips is always yapping about like the Joker is so musical. Prove it then. Yeah, the music sequences fucking suck in this movie. One, the song choices are just so boring. They don't add any like subtext or character development or emphasize anything that's happening on the screen in an interesting way. It's purely just some song about some basic emotion, happy, sad, love, and they'll just sing it. They're just old ass songs anyway. They're not even original. What is this? What is this? Why is this happening? Two, the actual just like filming of the music sequences are just so lame. Half the time, they're not really even doing anything. There's a few sequences I can think of where visually I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Particularly the courtroom one where he's got the gavel and he's like hitting the judge and he's like shooting people, because I was like, I guess that's Joker. Cool. And then I think he's tap dancing in one of them. Those are all I remember. The rest of them, most of the time, he's just like Joaquin stands up and he walks around a bench, and then he goes back in front of a TV, and then he snaps out of his hallucination. Or Harley and him are at a phone booth and they're just singing to each other. Musicals, I feel like, are known for their fluidity and their energy, and this movie just lacks that in any of the musical sequences. So that, along with the music not even saying anything about the story or characters, what are we watching? It's pointless. You could cut them out and just reduce the runtime. I don't get it. I will say though, I know I was saying I liked the first 30 minutes of the movie, and I did kind of like the intro sequence where I think it's the first time he's in the full Joker makeup in this movie, and Gaga's dancing in front of that moon thing and he walks out on the rooftop. I was like, that's kind of cool. I don't know, visually it looked cool, but I think that was still the beginning when I was like, oh, this could be cool. And then I realized the visuals are about all you get out of it. So as a musical, it's a failure. I remember the first Joker also having a bit more like humor. This movie really isn't funny at all. It barely has any jokes or anything to laugh at. The most I almost laughed in this movie was actually at the end when Gaga starts singing and he's like, stop singing. And it's not supposed to be funny, but after watching that whole movie and be like, they gotta stop singing, when he says it out loud, it is perfect. I almost feel like they had to have known when they put that in there. It was great. Also, it's a courtroom drama because this movie takes place in like 3 places. You get Arkham, Courtroom, miscellaneous few scenes. The courtroom shit is just like boring as well. It doesn't really add anything. I think all it does is just summarize Joker 1 and forcibly add unnecessary context. So for example, you get like cameos from Zazie Beetz, who was the neighbor in the first movie, which that was a mystery of the first movie. Did she die? And I think if you're making a sequel, it's kind of inevitable. You had to answer that question. So I don't really mind them being like, oh, she's alive. She's fine. I didn't really get behind, like I talked to Arthur's mom, and Arthur's mom said he's such a loser, and he believed this like comedian story. He based his whole life off of it. That felt like a bit much to me. Do we really need this extra context that just feels so forced because you're trying to justify any reason for this courtroom scene to exist? My impression from the first Joker that I thought was sufficient enough was just that she was implied to be mentally ill, and she raised Arthur alone, probably with abusive partners, and so clearly they're both gonna be unwell. That was fine with me. I never got the impression that Arthur's mom was self-aware enough to be like, oh, my son, he's a loser. He's such a joke. That was unnecessary. There's also the scene with Gary from the first movie who he saves. Gary Puddles. I just did the sketch. Gary Puddles. I think the Gary scene actually does have some justification to exist, though. Gary is sort of like, Arthur, you were the only person that was nice to me, and then you went and did this shit, and you traumatized me for life. Sort of the idea, like, how is he gonna have any more faith in the world if the one person who was nice to him is the one who ends up like this crazy serial killer guy? Gary has probably been similarly mistreated like Arthur, and so Arthur just doing this, Gary loses even more hope. So I did think that was an interesting plot line to bring up. But besides that, the courtroom shit adds nothing for the most part. Before I get into the end, courtroom and the whole ending of the movie in general, I think I should talk about Lady Gaga. I think her character had a lot of potential. I liked the fact that she was sort of a poser. Like, she admitted herself into Arkham. She is from a well-off family, but she acts all like loony. I mean, she kind of is. She acts like she's a part of this disenfranchised group of people that have had to deal with shit. Like, Arthur's been through shit. She probably hasn't. She's kind of playing it up. And I thought that was an interesting plot point, how she only really was a super fan of the Joker and could really give less of a shit about Arthur. So she would really just like manipulate him into leaning into that Joker side and kind of giving into his worst tendencies. That was an interesting plot point. Interesting idea for a sequel. I think it's good that this movie also somewhat touches on the idea that Arthur, he's never been with a woman and he's very clearly craving affection and stuff. So Harley is able to use that to very easily manipulate him. The scene in particular where like they're banging and she's like, I gotta put makeup on you and then we'll bang. So she's like, I'm not banging Arthur Fleck. I'm banging Joker. Joker's cool. Arthur's not. Do I think much happened out of it? Not really. But the seeds were there for an interesting sequel idea, especially around also the concept of Arthur dealing with the Joker persona and how that is like the only way people care about him now. Because the first movie was really about how he just was so unseen in society and no one really cared about him and he was treated like shit. But it took him becoming the character of the Joker who just didn't care anymore to like become something. So the fact that now he has this rabid fan base of people who are just like, we love you, Joker. In reality, he's always been Arthur, and Arthur is like, he was the person that needed the help. Even his own fan base doesn't care about that. I think is an interesting plot idea, and I think they could have made a sequel maybe where he grapples with that. Maybe does the Joker thing most of the movie, and then he's like, but what about Arthur? And that's when he sort of maybe tries to give up the Joker persona. I think there was maybe a good sequel idea in here. Instead, we got a weird-ass courtroom musical mumbo-jumbo. I don't even know. We got a weird-ass ending where I don't think I can say the R word on YouTube, but the Joker gets violated out of Arthur, I guess, apparently, because he talks some shit about the cops and he goes back to Arkham and then take him to the showers and basically, heavily implied. This is the most confusing scene in the movie to me. It is purely like, what the fuck did I just watch? Why would that be the instigating event that would make Arthur go, you know what? I don't want to be the Joker anymore. It makes no sense. Even if you think of it from like, I hope it doesn't come off bad, but like psychological perspective, the first movie was basically about how traumatized he was, and that trauma was basically molded the Joker, and that's why he leaned even more into it, because he just kept going through it and through it and through it. So wouldn't this additional traumatic event happening to him kind of bring out the Joker coping mechanism even more and have him full Joker even after that and just like kill the guards or something? It just made no sense narratively why that would just switch him back to normal. I don't know why else that scene would be in the movie. It seems like that was the idea of the implication there, that set him back. And then he does the whole courtroom scene where he's like, guys, I'm not the Joker. There never was a Joker. By this point in the movie, it's so muddy and confusing. I'm just like, what is happening? Okay, you're not the Joker. You're Arthur. You've always been Arthur, but the Joker, you were the Joker. You made him. And then the courtroom blows up, and these like super fans take him out. Now Arthur's like, oh, these guys are crazy. They're bad. I gotta get away from them. He gets away, finds Lady Gaga. She leaves. He just gets arrested again. He's back at Arkham, square one. So nothing in this movie fucking mattered. Does that just mean he's going back to trial anyway? Okay, he's back at Arkham. A prisoner fucking shanks him, and Arthur dies, and then the prisoner carves his mouth, and the idea is like he's the Joker now. What is this movie? I don't get this movie at all. And not in a way that I'm dumb. It's just this movie's dumb. I would never not get a movie. We're just supposed to accept this narrative that like the Joker was never actually gonna be the real Joker. He just started the movement. I thought the entire point of the first movie was you were trying to highlight how the world, society, keyword, would make a Joker, and then you're gonna say society makes a Joker by having this guy go through all this stuff, and then this other character we've seen for less than a minute on screen maybe just becomes a Joker just because he's crazy. And we like, what is this movie? It's so bad. So in reality, studios make sequels to make money. Joker 1 made $1 billion. It was going to get a sequel, even if it was always meant to be a standalone movie. In a perfect world, sequels are meant to enrich and expand upon the original, which is why it's interesting how this sequel fails, because it seems to actively try to convey that maybe Todd Phillips never wanted to make Joker 1 in the first place or something like that, and that we shouldn't be rooting for Joker or anything along those lines, which is dumb to me because so many great TV shows and movies, Breaking Bad, Sopranos, there's a ton that star evil protagonists that are just really interesting to watch, and it's a part of the appeal of the show is to try to sympathize with why they are the way they are. And I would much rather have fictional shows that delve into those subject matters than, let's say, like true crime series that talk about real families that have been killed and why the killer did it in real life. And it's like, that's gross. I would rather watch a Joker, which is fake, that talks about that than something real. And I don't think audiences aren't evil for trying to sympathize with like the character that they're watching for the entire movie. I just don't get exactly what Todd Phillips was trying to say with this. If the goal of this movie was to ensure you didn't want to make any more Joker movies, it paid off. The master plan worked. And in that way, maybe this movie is actually a masterpiece. 4 out of 10.